Evening, Dr. Dolan.
Good evening. You've got a great group there.
Yeah, how do we say hello in Japanese?
Konnichiwa.
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 You say sup. What's up?
Yeah.
Oh, we say that too. With an accent.
O genki desu ka?
Ah, genki desu. Arigatou.
No way. Teya?
What a flex! I love it.
Hey.
Whoa! Like fluid?
Are you based there?
Oh.
Yeah, I'm based there.
Oh, she
I forgot most of it, but I know a few.
Big man, Kyle Jackson. Welcome to the room.
Hey,
I
good.
said, how are you?
Welcome.
Hey, good evening, everyone.
How are you?
I'm peachy. I woke up this morning, so I'm blessed.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. This is a great room to host this event, and you guys all look great, motivated.
We have the Oval Office rug. Borrow it.
On the camera, it looks a little bit more like a steering wheel for a ship, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I see.
Looks very nautical and global, and 7 seas-ish.
Yeah. That's what we're going for.
So this is a recorded event, so I'm going to jump on its time. I'm going to open up right at 10 here. So welcome to the Jessup University MBA Empowering Women Globally event. We're really excited that everyone's here from all over the world. It's amazing. This event is co-hosted by Global Urban Nomads. I am Dr. Jeffrey Marizik, and I'm the professor of these wonderful students here. This is an event that is part of a soft launch of William Jessup University's Global Entrepreneurship Center. So we're really excited to be participating in this. We are proud to demonstrate a pilot tonight of a virtual learning ecosystem with our sponsors, Curator and Kaltura. And as we engage in a global conversation on women entrepreneurship tonight, we hope this is the beginning of a catalytic event that sparks new opportunities in a post-pandemic recovery fueled by an education technology revolution. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Asia Hamusmus, our MC for tonight's event.
Hi everyone, so as Professor said, my name is Asia, and we're just so excited for you guys to be here, to have this opportunity to be able to have a discussion with one.
Can you hear me? Seems we lost audio a bit, so I'm sorry. Where was I? So we're really here to set out to explore goal 4.4 of the UN sustainability goals, which is to provide to substantially increase relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills for employment, decent jobs, and entrepreneurship. And tonight, we are specifically targeting women, as we believe their underrepresentation in entrepreneurship needs to be resolved. So to that end, we have a guest speaker and some discussion questions to get feedback from each of you. Asia?
Thanks, Brett.
Okay, you can go ahead and talk. I
Can
can
you
hear.
go?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear me. I'm not actually sure.
I think you're muted. Oh no, Elena's unmuted. My fault.
Yeah.
Go for it. You got it.
I'm not sure if, so our guest speaker, Dr. Paul de la Cerda, not sure if he's on here yet for this meeting, but I will say a short introduction for him. And so Dr. Paul de la Cerda is an expert in innovation and leadership, and he's been speaking at different schools, sharing encouragement about entrepreneurship. A little bit about him: he actually graduated from a master's in business administration program, and he also pursued his doctorate in education and focusing on innovation and leadership, and also concentration in pretty much innovation and leadership, and he's quite the expert on that. And so I don't know if Dr. Paul de la Cerda is on this. If you're here, Doctor, go ahead and say something.
don't think so.
Not sure if he's on here.
Mhm.
So we can, for now, we can actually go to the warm-up polls that we have. Brendan, if you want to share the first one. So we actually have some warm-up polls, a little bit of icebreakers just to get to know people that are here in this room, in this chat. So we have our first one. So how many languages can you speak? Go ahead and answer this poll. Just so we can see the different results that we have on here. Is it everybody? Okay, who put 2 languages?
I did. Dan Dolan.
Dr. Dolan did.
Dr. Dolan. Sweet. So let's go on to the next poll that we have, which I believe is, okay, what superpower would you choose to have? Either time travel, ability to fly, read minds, or invisibility. Okay, sweet. Who put time travel? How many of you guys did that?
I did. Dan Dolan. Why am I the only one answering the quiz?
No, I did time travel too.
I took time travel.
Uh,
I'm the only one that put read minds.
Y'all put it in read minds. And who put ability to fly?
well, that's the one I did. Ability to fly. Dan Dolan. I figure if I can fly, I can probably do the other things too. Stealth mode.
That's clever. Okay, let's go on to our next poll. So our last one is, what is your favorite soda?
Ooh. I don't know 2 of those.
Those look like Japanese
One of them is.
drinks. Dr. Dolan, are you familiar?
I don't know the second 2, or I'm sorry, the last 2. Shawnee and the other one.
Ramune?
Yeah, I just chose Shawnee because I like the sound of it. Never tried it.
Does anybody know what ramen is?
It's great. It's like the marble soda, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
it's so good.
It's usually for kids. You like pop the marble in. And
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
Oh, those are awesome. Yeah, no, they're good.
It's popular in Japan, actually.
And everybody else, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm not sure, Dr. Paula Lacerda isn't here, but we can go ahead and go to the main questions. So kind of like what Grant was talking about, he was saying how we as a class were working on the 4.4 goal of the UN, and we wanted to create a space, again, to discuss about about economics, about entrepreneurship, and also specifically how we have seen women be able to be in entrepreneurship globally, and how we have seen that happen, how we've been able to enact change. And so we have 3 main questions. If someone could actually present that, or it's in the, let's see. Or do you want me to present it? Sorry guys, just 1 second. I can do it. I got it. Okay. Sorry guys. So we have 3 specific questions that we wanted to open up a space for discussion. So our first question is, what are some of the biggest issues, obstacles, or challenges that you have seen arise while enacting change? Also, I would further expand this question to ask, what are some issues, obstacles, or challenges that you have seen women entrepreneurs go through, or if you are a women entrepreneur, what issues, obstacles, or challenges have you seen? And so for this, for each question, for this discussion, we'd love to hear 2 to 3 responses from each different country. And also, you guys are free to unmute yourself whenever. So we're just going to kind of popcorn the answers to this. And so whoever wants to respond first, you're welcome to start.
I'll start. And my name's Kai Jackson, and with Global Urban Nomads. And to that first discussion question, what are some of the biggest issues, obstacles, or challenges that you have seen arise while enacting change? That's really a big question, but the first thing that comes to my mind is there's sort of this cliche statement that goes, everybody wants change, but no one wants to change. And so as much as we all drive toward things like reimagining education in the aftermath of a pandemic, I think it's really hard for people to wrap their minds around exactly, first of all, having a vision for what that looks like as a practical matter. And then to sort of take themselves to the edge of their comfort zone, or to stretch themselves. So some of the obstacles and challenges that I have seen is just, in a general sense, a lack of like true creativity and depth. For example, I've been working with a lot of leaders and policymakers in the K-12 education space, and they say, hey, well, how can we use education technology to reimagine how education is delivered and how education is received by the student? Yet what we're really seeing as we get ready to go back to school next fall when it starts is we're going to have very much of the same that we had pre-pandemic. So we haven't really reimagined it. We're taking some tweaks here and there. So, I mean, my answer is sort of very generic in that, people really getting imaginative, taking sort of standard protocols and taking those away and just building it back up, right? I think it's really hard for people to push themselves out of the comfort zones. And then the last thing I'll say is risk, just personal risk. When people start to do new things and make like drastic change, I think some people feel uncomfortable that they may not succeed and they can lose their livelihood, or they may be ostracized, or their professional credibility could be at risk if they propose something that doesn't actually work or come to fruition. So I'll stop there. That was a mouthful, but just to open it up.
Thank you, Kai. Thank you. Any other responses? We'll take one more response, and then we actually have Dr. De La Cerda on the phone with us right now. So we'll take one more response, and then we'll have him say a few things. So
I could add perspective from Japan just quickly. I've been here 26 years now, originally from Seattle, and just tapping into what Kaim said, in Japan, Kaim mentioned everybody wants change, but in Japan, really nobody wants change, pretty much. Change is the enemy of the Japanese culture in many ways, especially when it gets into like any kind of bureaucratic system. So that's been really frustrating for me, and I think it's a huge problem for the country. And Kaim also mentioned the idea of risk-taking, and the Japanese aversion to change is linked to the aversion to risk. So it's, I think we should get to Paul, but I just wanted to mention that here in Japan, both of these, I think, are a huge problem for innovation and entrepreneurial accomplishment. So I'm hoping that there can be some change.
Can I follow up to what Dr. Dolan just said?
yeah, of course.
The last piece about risk, I sort of couldn't agree more with that. So for most of my life, I've either worked for the federal government and the military, I've worked for the state, or some sort of a government type agency. And so I knew that, I was going to get paid, right, for the most part from the government. The government was going to continue operating. So I always felt that even when I thought I was stretching myself, my livelihood was intact. I did not have to worry about, being paid as long as I sort of did what I was supposed to do. However, now as an entrepreneur who just started his business less than 12 months ago, like my level of risk, I'm a fairly risk tolerant person. So when I go for it big, but I am very aware of the risk and how it impacts my ability to pay my mortgage or my ability to feed my kids. And so risk tolerance is very much a thing for entrepreneurs, as opposed to risk for government agencies or government agencies. So I'll stop there.
That's great. Thank you so much for your guys' responses. So we have Dr. De La Cerda here on the phone. Doctor, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you all hear me okay?
Can you guys hear him?
Yes.
Fantastic. Go ahead, Doctor. We're all listening.
Well, listen, thanks again. And I think that, this topic absolutely is something that perhaps Dr. Mrizik has shared with you all. Just finishing up my dissertation about a topic I think is really important that can't be ignored, in particular when we're looking at investment and we're looking at certainly disparities when it comes to investment. And, when we're looking at, gender disparity and also looking at other kinds of barriers that cause, I think, others to think about risk or think second about taking a risk in being an entrepreneur, has a lot to do with a lot of socioeconomic and self-efficacy. But most importantly, there's a lot of diversity and inclusion issues that we still face. And as a world, I was able to examine from a global perspective and also drill it down into what's happening on a local perspective. And so most of my research and a lot of my findings, I would think are informed really by experience myself as well. I started my own business in my early 20s and experienced a lot of challenges as an ethnic minority launching a business and it being very unique in my family structure to have anyone in my family to take that route as a potential career. And I'm certainly curious about you all, about your paths, because everyone has a different path. What I found, again, drilling back into gender disparity in my research is that we still have a big challenge ahead of us. And we're finding, and my findings are that in our education system, unfortunately, women still do not have quite the resources or the access to capital that their male counterparts have when they're looking at launching a business. And that issue in itself is one that, we would think here in 2021 we've progressed in that way, but we have not. And as I interviewed over 15 directors and deans of programs at respectable colleges that have entrepreneurial programs in their local communities throughout the state of California, really clearly discovered that these individuals who have been leading these programs do find that their male counterparts do have more access and have more resource, more support, and less barrier to starting businesses or being successful. And that's something we still, as a country, as a world, as a community, need to work on. And my prediction and my hope, and what I see in what's happening in corporate America today, and in reality is, and I might be a little biased because I've been surrounded by women in most of my life, having raised 2 daughters, and being married to a very strong entrepreneurial woman. I would say that I could see and I've experienced that they far surpass in regards to worth ethic and ability to see a better return on investment. And the reality is that I don't understand quite why, but I think there's reasons that I think have to do with a lot of traditionalism of why women still outperform men by 25% in the marketplace, but yet still only 90-some% of the investment is actually goes into male-owned businesses versus women-owned businesses, and that's a challenge and that's a problem. I think we will wake up, and I think when we do wake up, we're going to see hopefully a whole new transition of women who will rise up with a whole different mentality in regards to what corporate responsibility is all about. Why do I say that? Because every one of us around this room and in this talk knows to some extent what it feels like to be raised by a mother, hopefully one who really nourished you and brought you up in an environment that can give you the encouragement and the strength to be on your own and to learn on your own and think on your own. And with that said, I think there's a special, element to women-owned businesses that when we really start to harness that, we can really improve a lot of socioeconomic issues that we see as a country and as a world. So I'll just stop there. A little bit of food for thought for you all. Happy to join in any more of the conversation as well.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Dr. De La Cerda. So happy to have you here. Let's continue with the questions that we have for discussion. So we talked about the first question about issues, obstacles, and challenges that arise while enacting change. And our second question is, what are some accessible avenues of entrepreneurship that you've seen or that you've experienced? What different ways have you been able to pursue entrepreneurship? Again, would love to have 2 or 3 responses for this question, even from our cohort here in the room. Would love to have a couple responses for this one.
Accessible avenues for entrepreneurship. At least in America, there's a great amount of opportunity for people to start their own business. My first initial thought is my mom. She has a couple different businesses that she runs herself. She's a realtor that she works under an agency, but it's her own business. And so she has a real estate license, she's running that. And then she also is in I guess they call it shabby chic. It's like they redo furniture, vintage goods, all of those kinds of things. So those are the first 2 that I just immediately think of. It's just, running like a shop or, picking something that you're passionate about, running with it, and then using that as an opportunity to generate business for yourself. That's just the first couple that come to my mind.
And maybe when you say accessible avenues of entrepreneurship, are you referring to like accessibility, like disability accessibility, or you just mean accessibility like availability?
I think we're referring to accessibility like
The latter, yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the latter of the 2.
I think in Central California, where I live and where I teach, there are a number of avenues for entrepreneurship, but in terms of the knowledge of how to get there, that part is a lot more opaque for people. Like anytime I discuss it with my students, they are full of ideas and they know a number of people who are successful, but trying to walk them through the process of how they get from an idea to actually market can be a very complicated process. And kind of like all the things that you guys are talking about in terms of, and Paul was discussing, people who have higher access to liquidity, or people who have stronger families, or who have access to, banks or whatever it is. That is not something that we see in rural poverty-stricken areas. We just don't have that type of accessibility in terms of high credit scores or, those pieces.
So I hear you saying there's plenty of avenues, but they're not all accessible.
Well, the accessibility, I think shifts. I think the knowledge part is an access barrier.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So there needs to be, it seems to me like there needs to be more of an education around entrepreneurship and kind of ingraining that into those communities and showing people opportunities that they might be able to have, given the right knowledge to do so. That aimless wandering, hey, I have an idea, but I don't know how to actually make it physical, is kind of where the disconnect lies. Okay.
Is this a good place to jump in?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Feel free to.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to add to realities that exist in starting a business. In particular, I would say that there are definitely a lot of advantages that are given to those that have, that come from families, that come from areas where they already have money or have somebody within the family who has been successful versus those that are starting from a place to where there's no knowledge or perhaps no family legacy. And I think the thing is it is much more difficult, but everyone has to start somewhere. And they all start, most every one of those businesses that are successful today that we think of being successful started a scrappy, started, it's somebody having to really work hard around the clock to, as a group or as a brand new startup. I think the realness of the fact of the matter is that, it's still, many people do not know how to teach entrepreneurship very well. And I'm not saying that, in a way that I teach it perfectly either, but I think experience speaks volumes. When we have individuals being hired by education systems, teaching these classes, teaching these courses, and have never, ever been in the trenches, I think it does a huge disservice. And I've seen that time and time and again. And I think that we need to correct it in our education system, because entrepreneurs can breed entrepreneurs. Just like when you want to be a surgeon, you learn from other good surgeons. An attorney, you learn from other good attorneys. You want to be a good entrepreneur, you're going to learn from someone that busted their rear to be successful in it, not somebody who learned it from a book or watched videos about it or knew somebody that knew somebody who was successful in entrepreneurship.
Any other responses? Feel free to jump in.
Paul, what is the most important piece that you see missing from the teaching of entrepreneurship?
I really see, is that Dr. Queenan?
Yeah, it's me.
Great question. I see, more than anything, in the entrepreneurs that I have coached and worked with and being from my own experience, the imposter syndrome. I mean, just believing that we can't do it, and realizing that you're going to fail quite a few times before you get it right. I think that in itself, in depending on where you are, again, as far as having stability or someone to fall back on, or a family member or someone to fall back on, if you don't have that, you're going to take a big risk of really not having support system, and risking putting your family at risk or your own self at risk financially. So I know that's a huge barrier. It's just having that ability not to self-doubt yourself. And if there's a common trait, certainly among those that I've seen that succeed, is they have this tremendous amount of grit, and I'm sure you all have been sharing and heard about that, but it's real. It's real. It's just having that gusto, and it's really for us in our Latino community, call it ganas. And ganas is about having guts and having spirit, that kind of spirit to never give up. And you'll find that in any kind of field, athletics being one of those that I'm very familiar with as well. You look at the Olympians and champions who have really put their lives on the line to be an Olympian and to be the best. It's no different. That kind of mentality needs to be the same kind of mentality that makes an entrepreneur successful.
Thank you for that.
Hey, Paul, this is Kai. One thing that you had mentioned was as a barrier to sort of entrepreneurial avenues for women is access to capital. I spent some time today talking to some chamber folks around entrepreneurs and renewable energy and in blue tech down here in San Diego area. And what they had mentioned was kind of like you did. One of the biggest barriers was access to capital. And so I do understand that globally there are microloans and things to sort of help reduce those barriers. But sometimes big ideas take big capital investments. And so even if you do have an accessible avenue for entrepreneurship, how do you overcome when big ideas require big capital investments? How do you sort of solve that problem for women and minorities?
I just think that, again, the whole reality of women having to prove themselves in front of investors, which are dominated by men, and many times, cliques of men who are in it to just support each other and build each other up. And sometimes just be in that circle to where a woman cannot break through. And I believe that if we can get through that and develop new entrepreneurs and investors that can get past that mentality, or whether it be just the old school of thought or just tradition in itself or cultural barriers, we'll see more success, I think, and women being given a chance. I just think in technology in particular, Kai, when we look at tech and the dominance of tech industry being male dominated, but behind the scenes, a lot of the work that's really being done to make that company successful, as a myriad of individuals and people from all walks of life, but also women who are really doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but the men taking all the credit. It's just, I hate to see that more often than not, but it's true. It's true. And, I think having raised two daughters who were told in high school by a coach who was teaching the career planning class that entrepreneurship's not for little girls, that pissed me off, and that's what inspired me to want to do more for women in entrepreneurship, and hopefully continue to do that with the experience, the work that I've been doing, such as opening up a center in East Los Angeles to serve women who want to start businesses. And I think we need to see more of that, Kai. I'd love to see more centers specifically focusing just only on women. And you know what? The men can get over it, quite frankly. Because there's incubators dominated by men. They have plenty of space in itself, but they're just not enough that serve are focused on women.
Paul, you must be reading my mind. This is Kai again. So as you're talking, and I'm following along, and I'm like, how can you blow the doggone roof off of this thing? So and what I was thinking is right what you were talking about. You have chambers of commerce, for example. You have ethnic chambers, so the Black Chamber of Commerce, Asian Chamber of Commerce, Latin Chamber of Commerce. So in the vein of shared interests, what about something like a female business owned Chamber of Commerce? Right? I mean, we've done it like ethnic, like where it serves women-owned businesses, right? So a woman's chamber of commerce, right? I mean, that idea may sound different, but it's right in the space of what you're saying. And can you just blow the roof off of that thing? Can we start that down in LA? A women business chamber of commerce, Paul?
There are organizations that do focus, on women empowerment. But chambers, again, are definitely places to where I think there would be space for that. But again, I think creating an ecosystem, and Dr. Marizik and I talk about, just again, blowing the roof off of the old school ecosystem, creating a whole new one. Absolutely. I mean, look, the LA Chamber of Commerce has a woman CEO for the first time ever. I know that she's certainly breaking barriers, and still trying to I think make her own path there in Los Angeles. And I had an opportunity to speak to her, kind of a private conversation with her when she first came on board. And I could see and kind of hear in the questions that she was saying that, she's going to really have to prove herself 10 times as much as being taken seriously by CEOs of Fortune 500 companies just for her being female, let alone Latina female. And so, absolutely, Kai, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to create a coalition. But look, it's gonna have to be, I think, one that is women-led. I mean, we just need to let support a group of women to make that happen, because they're the ones that really are going to know. Women are going to know how to create the environment that they need to be nourished. We're not going to be able to do that. I think we've tried with women business centers as a nation through the SBA, and those have failed. They have failed, and we've tried that as a government to support women, and just time and time again they come and go.
I think the ladies in this classroom here tonight are all raising their hands silently to make this happen. I think so.
That's great.
Thank you guys.
I'm hoping that I could share my research with you all, and you can look at it, and maybe someday one of you around the room here will pick it up and continue it, because that's what it takes. And that's, I think, the part of why we go into doctoral programs, and hoping that somebody will continue the research and continue to push it forward.
Thank you guys so much. That was really great. Such a great discussion. So one of our other questions that we have is, what is the current state of entrepreneurship in your country or the area that you're at? So this could be based on economics, or just we kind of did talk about it with entrepreneurship for men, for women. But what is the current state of entrepreneurship that you see in the area that you're at?
I'll share from a perspective that, particularly in Asia, and talking to a lot of students in an area that's predominantly a lot of international Asian students, who still feel that, again, there's challenges for women to start businesses in Asia, and being encouraged to innovate. And so I think certainly China is a country to where we still see challenges that exist there. And I think that, again, comes down to a lot of cultural dominance, and just, again, a lot of implicit bias about the woman's role. And that's just China, and it's through other countries too that I don't have as much experience in, but some of the research and empirical information that I read about other countries, there's still the challenges of of women being able to be given even the chance to work, period. So that's a huge barrier. But in the United States, I think still we still have a huge gap, and the data doesn't lie. You follow the money trail, and the money in itself, when you show what and how much investments actually being made into women-owned businesses, it is just dumbfounded of how ridiculous amount of money is not being spent or invested. I think that because we are such a melting pot, in particular just in California as well, that I see still, in 21st century, speak for my community and the Latino community, that you still have a lot of first generation whose parents, in particular the matriarch or the patriarch, not encouraging Latina women to get into entrepreneurship as a career. They roll their eyes. They make every excuse to believe that that's not a career to pursue.
If I could just, this is Dan again, Dan Dolan. If I could just mention the case of Japan with regard to gender equality. You probably know that the World Economic Forum has a gender equality index, and 153 countries listed. Japan is 121 out of 153, ranked almost at the bottom. Only 15% of management positions are held by females in Japan. So there's really, really a problem here. And of course, this idea of gender equality links directly to the ability of women to be entrepreneurs. So I just wanted to mention again my experience here in this country.
Are there places in the United States that have sort of more dense or concentrated gender inequalities? I know there's certain places that have more, sort of racial inequalities. What about gender inequalities? Are there states that are that way?
Yeah, I've never seen that data, Kai. I'm looking right now.
Yeah, I tend to think like maybe some of the places in the South or West Virginia or some places, it just sort of makes me wonder. But just a random question.
Yeah.
I would say kind of that the more rural areas of a rural America still would show far less opportunity for women or encouragement for women to own or run a local grocery store, or just a stable area business, whether it be a laundromat or just the staple types of business, even a franchise. I mean, if you even look at one of the fastest growing franchises is a Chick-fil-A. I'm curious to look. I think I came across some data saying most Chick-fil-A's are being turned over to men. And again, I would challenge those franchises that aren't, allowing women to have an opportunity like a Chick-fil-A, which is pretty much money in the bag. The way those things are going right now, is a problem.
Do you think that a large portion of, like, not the gender component or the inequality component, but of challenges in general center around financial literacy? Like, did you find that in your research?
Absolutely. Literacy and just, the basics of accounting and finance and understanding time value of money absolutely is the key component of understanding how to balance the books, read a profit and loss statement. Those basic elements are not taught, in our K-12 system, as you all know, that are in education. So let alone an MBA program where even in an MBA, most MBA programs, you might get one class in accounting, maybe two if that's going to be your route or emphasis, maybe one or two finance classes, and that's about it. So, but those are such an important part, literacy of finance, using being wise on the way you borrow money and the way you accept investment, the way you structure contracts to accept any investment, or how much you give up to start a business. If you have an innovation that's intellectual property worthy, it is very complicated. So the more time that someone can spend on those elements of finance and accounting, and I'll tell you one thing, it's not the most sexy part of being an entrepreneur. It's not. But it's one of the most important foundations to be able to have the right cash flow and be able to expand and grow your business successfully. And again, if that's not your strength, then you should find a partner who has that strength in knowing how to manage the money of the business.
Right, that's a really important point. When I lived in South America, there were women entrepreneurs all over the place. But what I don't know is if they stayed at very low level entrepreneurship, and if potentially the men had the more successful entrepreneurship. That's nothing I never looked into that there. But the women started businesses, they were making platas and all kinds of things, but they were just like all over the place. But they were almost all, actually, I think they were all that I saw female run, but it could potentially be that the women stayed at a very rudimentary entrepreneurship level, whereas the men maybe had more opportunity. But I'm curious, so I'm gonna do some research on that now.
Any other responses? We do have time for one more response before we start closing up. Or any other questions you guys might have for anyone here in the room.
I have a question for Paul. Hi, Paul. My name is June Holstrom. I was just wondering, have you dealt with Native American women that have opened businesses?
Yes, actually, I actually lived in Oklahoma for 9 years, where they have one of the most concentrated areas of Native Americans. And when I went to school, the Native American population in Oklahoma State University was actually larger than the African American population, and they spent a population at the state university. So haven't had many friends, and growing up my roommate was not full-blood Navajo. Taught me a lot about the culture, taught me a lot about what he had his own bias for, was what he would say the place of a woman in the tribe. And it's still very much traditionally, from my experience of listening to him and challenging him to think differently, but it was very hard because he still had this very, very much ingrained implicit bias that women stayed home and they took care of the family. And so I think that's a huge challenge for the Native American community. I didn't see many Native Americans in business school when I was in college. And so I think the population is still very, very low. And that creates good opportunity, though, for someone to step up and really break that barrier and challenge, the status quo.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sorry. Dr. De La Seta, is there a way that we could see or get a copy of your dissertation for our further research?
Absolutely. So I'll make sure to get it to Dr. Mrozek, and he will share that with all of you guys.
Thank you so much.
Of
I
course.
actually had another quick question for you too, Doctor. So I know that we had mentioned obviously a lot of the barriers for women in entrepreneurship being either whether it's education, financial literacy, accessibility to capital. But what would you suggest in combating the cultural aspect of it? As you were just mentioning with Native Americans and me being Latina, I know that it definitely is taught in our culture that the women stay home and take care of the family. They take care of, the needs of the family, the house, things like that. How would you go about, combating against the cultural adversity that's already present within minorities who want to become entrepreneurs, especially women?
Yeah, I a very good question. We need to start young. We need to start in elementary schools. We need our elementary schools to start introducing entrepreneurship to young girls. We need to grow those programs that emphasize innovation at a very young age, helping them create, different opportunities to create little mini businesses. So I think it really culturally, in our school system, if we can see more offerings of those types of programs to young girls in those communities that do have those programs, and there are some that do, but not enough. I think and if they trace and track, the success of those young girls when they go throughout high school and go on to college, that we can see more interest, more, I would say, I think it comes down to the attitude, an attitude of success that I could do this. It's not something that I can't get into. And so as we see women breaking a lot of barriers in sports, as you guys are seeing, we had the first female football player that got an NCAA scholarship that wasn't a kicker, was actually in the defensive line, came from East LA College about 2 years ago. And what happened there was that she was on the Super Bowl commercial, and we were celebrating this just before COVID, that we were breaking barriers for the first woman to make it, or to be offered a football scholarship. So I think we sometimes, as a country, even as media, they run with it just because of the soundbite for the Times to show these barriers are being broken. But if we just need to keep screaming it from the rooftops and work with our youth, I think everything starts there at that level. And to get young ladies in STEM, which I've been working on and getting for years in programs to get women just interested in engineering, science as a field of study, the same way as for entrepreneurship. If we could start young, we can break more barriers.
Thank you.
That's great. Any other responses to any of the questions that were asked? Nope, no responses. Well, then we can most definitely close up. Before we all leave this chat, I do want to, on behalf of our cohort, thank all of you for taking the time to be with us at this meeting. It means a lot to us, especially in our education. And I do feel, for me personally, I don't know for everybody else, but I definitely learned a lot of things from this meeting, gaining insights from all of you. And so before we leave, I do want to remind you guys about this. For those of you who weren't here earlier, we do have the Slack invite in the chat if you haven't already joined. And we welcome you guys to add your LinkedIn in the chat as well, whether on here or on Slack, so that we can all stay connected. And the Slack will remain up even after this meeting, for us to remain in discussion, for any questions that you guys might have. We still want to be able to connect with every single one of you. And so again, we thank you so much for coming to this meeting, and we hope you guys have a great rest of your day or your evening. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was great being with you guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good work.
Thank you.